I never imagined the company I helped build from scratch would one day stab me in the back and smile while doing it. My name is Maya Collins, and for 6 years, Skyline Innovations was my second home. I poured everything into that company, my time, my creativity, my sanity. I was there before the name existed, before we had funding, before anyone believed we'd make it. And at the center of it all was Evelyn, my mentor, or so I thought. Evelyn Hart was the kind of woman who walked into a room and everyone straightened up. Sharp suits, sharper eyes. She was 10 years older than me, brilliant, confident, and terrifyingly persuasive. When I met her at a tech startup conference, I was just another desperate developer with a prototype and no connections. She saw potential in me, or maybe she saw opportunity. Either way, she offered me a position the next day. I thought it was fate. We worked side by side, long nights fueled by cold coffee and ambition. I designed products, she handled investors. She'd call me her right hand, her shadow genius. I trusted her completely, maybe more than I should have. When she said, "We're partners in spirit," I believed her. But then, things started to shift. It began small, my ideas being presented as hers in meetings. I brushed it off. She was the face of the company after all. Then came the bonuses I never received, the recognition I never got, the projects I wasn't invited to. Still, I told myself, it's fine. She's guiding me. My time will come. The real blow came one Friday evening, the kind of quiet night when the office lights hum louder than the computers. I stayed late finishing the UX design for our new software. Evelyn had left hours earlier, or so I thought. Around 10 p.m., I went to print the final mock-ups, and that's when I saw her office light flicker back on. Curious, I peeked through the glass. She wasn't alone. Mr. Langford, our biggest investor, sat across from her. They were laughing. My designs, my months of work, were laid out across the desk. And then I heard it. Evelyn's voice, smooth as silk, saying it was tough, but my team finally got it right. I led every stage of development myself. I felt my chest tighten. My team? No, my designs. My late nights. My sacrifices. I froze there, half hidden in the hallway shadows, listening to her take credit for everything I'd built. The man praised her brilliance, said she was the heart of the company. She smiled, that practiced, perfect smile, and replied, I couldn't have done it without, well, actually, yes I could have. It was a dagger wrapped in charm. Something inside me cracked that night. Not fully, just a hairline fracture in my trust, invisible but irreversible. I walked out before they saw me, forcing a smile when the janitor greeted me on my way down. My hands trembled so hard I could barely press the elevator button. At home, I told myself it didn't mean anything. Maybe she had to say that to secure the deal. Maybe she'd explain it tomorrow. Maybe I was overreacting. But deep down, a quiet voice whispered, you saw the truth. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her smile. I heard her voice, taking what was mine. Still, by morning, I convinced myself to stay calm. I showed up early to the office, hoping to talk things through. Evelyn greeted me warmly, too warmly. She handed me a latte, called me superstar, and acted as if nothing had happened. And I played along. Because I wanted to believe her. Because part of me still needed to believe I mattered to her, that we were in this together. But when I checked my inbox, a new project file awaited me, one I hadn't been invited to join. And the subject line read, Internal Transfer, Design Role Transition. That's when my stomach dropped. It wasn't suspicion anymore. It was proof, cold, written proof that I was being quietly pushed out of the very company I helped create. Evelyn's protege was becoming disposable. Still, I smiled when she walked past my desk. Still, I said thank you when she praised my past contributions. Still, I convinced myself it was all temporary. Because the mind clings to denial like it's a life raft. But deep down, something in me, something fierce, something vengeful, had already begun to wake. And it whispered, they don't know who they just betrayed. Sometimes, betrayal doesn't arrive with a knife in your back, it comes disguised as a compliment. The Monday after that internal transfer email, I told myself it was just a mistake. HR messes up titles all the time, right? So I walked into work pretending everything was normal. But once you notice cracks in the glass, you can't unsee them. Evelyn was colder that week. Not cruel, just distant. The warmth in her eyes had been replaced by calculation. Her once frequent check-ins about my work became short, clipped replies. "I'll handle that," or "just focus on what's assigned to you." What's assigned to me? That used to be everything. Now I was on the sidelines, watching projects I started being reassigned to others, especially to Nathan, our new strategic designer. He was charming in that corporate way, polite, ambitious, always eager to please Evelyn. She treated him like her new favorite. And every time I saw them laughing in her office, that quiet voice inside me whispered again, "You're being replaced." Still, I pushed it down. Maybe she was grooming him for a different role. Maybe she wanted me to rest after months of overwork. I tried to be understanding, loyal, even. But the universe kept throwing me hints I didn't want to see. It started with the project files. I logged into our internal server one night, double-checking my code from home, only to find entire folders missing, ones I had personally created. I thought maybe IT was reorganizing things, so I emailed them. They said those directories were moved under Evelyn's account. You'll need her permission to access them now. Permission? For my own work? I sat staring at that email for a long time. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to type something confrontational. But then I stopped. I didn't want to seem paranoid. So instead, I sent a polite message to Evelyn. "Hey, IT says some of my design folders are under your access now. Can you share them back?" She replied 5 minutes later. "Oh, must have been an admin mix-up. I'll look into it." But she never did. By Friday, I wasn't even on the meeting invites anymore. Not even the brainstorming sessions, the ones I had started years ago. I watched Nathan walk into those rooms, laptop under his arm, flashing me a sympathetic smile that made my stomach turn. He knew. They all knew something I didn't. At lunch, my closest coworker, Jenna, asked quietly, "Did you hear about the promotion announcement next week?" I shook my head. "No. Who's getting promoted?" She hesitated, chewing her lip. "I probably shouldn't say anything, but it's between Evelyn and Nathan. She's been introducing him as her right hand lately." That phrase hit like a bullet. Her right hand. The same title she used for me. I laughed it off, pretending it didn't sting. "Good for him," I said, but my voice sounded hollow. That night, I stayed late again. Not because I had work, but because I didn't know where else to be. The office was quiet, lights dimmed, and my reflection in the glass looked like a stranger. I thought about all the nights I'd spent there before, with Evelyn beside me, dreaming about the company's future, celebrating milestones with cheap champagne and laughter. Now it was just me and the hum of computers. When I finally packed my bag, I noticed Evelyn's office door slightly open. Curiosity tugged at me again. I told myself not to look, not to care, but I peeked in anyway. On her desk sat a glossy folder labeled Project Athena, Proprietary Designs. That was my prototype, the one I'd created before Skyline even existed. The one I'd shared with her years ago, trusting she'd protect it. I froze. My name wasn't anywhere on the document cover. It read, Lead Designer, Nathan Cole. Supervisor, Evelyn Hart. My throat went dry. I wanted to storm in, demand answers, call her out for stealing. But fear, that quiet, humiliating kind, stopped me. Because what if I was wrong? What if it was a placeholder name? What if this was all some misunderstanding? I told myself I'd ask her tomorrow. Calmly. Professionally. But when tomorrow came, she smiled at me in the hallway and said, "Morning, Maya. Could you finalize the old product reports? We'll need them for audit. Don't worry about the new launches, I've got Nathan on those." Just like that. I'd been quietly benched. That entire day felt like moving underwater, my thoughts heavy, slow, uncertain. Was she really betraying me? Or was I sabotaging myself with suspicion? I hated how unsure I'd become, how easily she could twist the story in my head. That night, I journaled like I used to when I was younger. I wrote down every red flag, every change in tone, every lie disguised as kindness. By the end, the page was full. I looked at what I'd written and whispered aloud, "No, she wouldn't do that. She's not like that." But deep down, I knew. The woman who once said we'd build an empire together had already started building it, just without me. And for the first time, I realized, maybe this wasn't just business. Maybe it was war. I always thought betrayal would come with noise, yelling, confrontation, chaos. But when mine arrived, it was quiet. Almost gentle. Like a knife sliding through silk. It happened on a Thursday morning, 2 weeks after I'd noticed my files disappearing. I walked into the office early, as usual, only to find everyone gathered around the big screen in the lounge. Evelyn stood front and center, beaming, the Skyline logo glowing behind her. "Big news, team," she said, her voice rich with excitement. "Today, we officially launch Project Athena, our new flagship design that will define Skyline's next decade." Applause erupted. I clapped too, because my body moved before my mind could process the words. Project Athena. My project. She clicked the remote, and slides filled the screen. Sleek designs, clean code snippets, a prototype demo. Every single detail was mine. The structure, the UX flow, even the color palette. My work, presented like it belonged to someone else. And then the final slide appeared. Lead developer, Nathan Cole. Project director, Evelyn Hart. My name wasn't anywhere. The room blurred. My heartbeat roared in my ears. Someone patted my shoulder. I think it was Jenna, but her words were a muffled echo. All I could see was Evelyn, standing there like a queen addressing her court, soaking in the applause for a crown she hadn't earned. When the crowd dispersed, I forced myself to approach her. My voice trembled. "Evelyn, can we talk?" She smiled, as if we were discussing lunch plans. "Of course, Maya. Isn't this exciting? Project Athena is going to put us on the map." I clenched my jaw. "You mean me on the map? Those designs, that was my prototype. You know it." Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes sharpened. "Oh, Maya, you helped, sure. But this version is a team effort. Nathan did most of the recent development. You've been focusing elsewhere, remember?" "I never agreed to that," I snapped. "You took my files. You locked me out." Her tone cooled. "Maya, watch your words. You're still part of this company for now. Don't ruin your reputation over a misunderstanding." Reputation. That word hit harder than any slap. I looked around. The others were watching, pretending not to, but I could feel their eyes. Evelyn knew exactly what she was doing, twisting the narrative, painting me as unstable, ungrateful. My throat burned, but I managed. "You stole my work." She leaned in slightly, voice low and smooth. "You were sloppy with your documentation. That's not theft, that's business. Next time, protect your ideas better." And just like that, she walked away. I stood frozen in the hallway, my mind unraveling. Every late night, every extra hour, every sacrifice I'd made, gone. Years of loyalty erased in a single presentation. By noon, my inbox was flooded with congrats emails from people assuming I'd worked on the project. I didn't even respond. I just stared at the screen, feeling hollow. Then came a message from HR, subject, role reassignment. Effective immediately. The contents were simple. My position was being realigned. Effective next week, I'd report to Nathan. My responsibilities? Legacy project maintenance. In plain terms, busy work. I went to the restroom, locked the stall, and cried silently. Not just from anger, from humiliation. From guilt. I should have seen it sooner. Every red flag, every shift in tone, every time she said we when she meant me. I ignored them all because I believed in her. And now she'd gutted my career with a smile. That night, I stayed long after everyone left. The office was dark except for the blue glow of my monitor. I opened my old files, scrolling through lines of code and design drafts. My fingerprints were all over them, the proof that I had built Athena from the ground up. Then I opened the company's internal press release. Evelyn's quote read, "This project represents the hard work and vision of our talented team. I'm proud to lead such innovative minds, especially Nathan, whose brilliance made this possible." Not one mention of me. Not even a footnote. My hands trembled. The mouse slipped from my fingers, hitting the floor with a dull thud. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the screen through blurry eyes. I wasn't even angry anymore. just numb. Then something in me broke, quietly, cleanly. Like the click of a lock. I shut the laptop, wiped my tears, and whispered to the empty room, "You took everything from me, Evelyn. But I built this. I made you." The words didn't sound like a cry of pain. They sounded like a promise. Because beneath the heartbreak, beneath the disbelief, something else was stirring, something cold and sharp. A new voice whispered inside me, steady and dangerous. "If they can steal from me, I can take it back and more." I stood up, took one last look at the Skyline logo glowing on the office wall, and walked out. The night air felt different, heavy, electric, alive. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment the old Maya died. And the woman who would destroy Skyline Innovations, who would become their biggest rival, was born. When the company you built turns its back on you, the silence that follows is unbearable. No phone calls. No messages. No apologies. Just absence. The week after Skyline launched Project Athena, I stopped showing up. At first, I told myself it was temporary, that I needed a break. But deep down, I knew I was avoiding the humiliation. The pitying glances. The whispered rumors. I spent days sitting on my couch, laptop closed, staring at nothing. The woman who used to run on caffeine and adrenaline was now running on regret. Everywhere I looked, Evelyn's name was plastered across tech blogs and interviews. The visionary behind Skyline's latest innovation. Every article praised her leadership, her brilliant young team. And every time I saw Nathan's smiling face next to hers, a cold ache spread through my chest. My world had shrunk to a single thought: they took everything from me. But there's something strange about pain. After a while, it burns so long it starts to harden. It becomes fuel. It started one afternoon when I got an email from a recruiter. Someone I'd met at a conference years ago. She said, "I heard about Skyline's new launch. Impressive work. I assume you were part of that team." For the first time in weeks, I didn't delete the message. I just stared at it, my reflection faint in the laptop screen. She assumed I was part of it because she knew my work. Because my fingerprints were still visible, even if Evelyn tried to scrub them off. That's when it hit me. They may have taken my job, my title, my credit, but they couldn't take me. The mind that built Athena, the creativity that turned an idea into a revolution, that was still mine. No one could steal that. That night, I opened my old backup drive, the one Evelyn didn't know existed. Inside were years of designs, notes, prototypes, test builds. Every concept I'd ever abandoned because Skyline didn't have time. But I had time now. I made coffee, tied my hair back, and opened a blank workspace. For hours, I coded, sketched, rewired, rebuilt. My tears had dried. All that remained was focus. I wasn't chasing revenge yet, not consciously. I was chasing myself. The version I'd lost under Evelyn's shadow. The first sunrise I saw in weeks spilled through my blinds, soft and gold. My apartment was a mess, empty cups, half-eaten food, tangled wires, but I didn't care. I had something again. A pulse. And somewhere between exhaustion and clarity, I whispered, "No one's coming to save you, Maya. So save yourself." That became my mantra. Day by day, I built quietly. I revisited every rejected idea Evelyn had dismissed as too risky or not marketable. I saw the patterns now, how she'd subtly crushed my innovation to make herself shine brighter. That realization didn't make me crumble anymore. It made me fierce. By the end of that month, I had something new, something better than Athena. Faster, smarter, cleaner. A system designed not for Skyline's investors, but for users. For people like me who had been overlooked and underestimated. I called it Phoenix because it was born from ashes. But even with the progress, the nights were hard. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, hearing Evelyn's voice in my head, "Don't ruin your reputation." And every time, I'd whisper back into the dark, "Watch me rebuild it." One morning, Jenna texted me, the first message since I'd left Skyline. "Jenna, you okay? Heard HR is circulating rumors that you quit out of burnout." Me, figures. They needed a story. "Jenna, I shouldn't say this, but Evelyn and Nathan just signed a new investor. She's calling Phoenix like features the next version of Athena." My blood ran cold. She'd found traces of my early work again, and she was trying to replicate it. That's when pain stopped being pain. It became purpose. I didn't want pity. I didn't want an apology. I wanted to win. Not just to survive her betrayal, but to outshine it. That night, I printed a single sheet of paper and taped it above my desk. Goal: build something so undeniable they can never erase your name again. Every keystroke after that carried weight. Every idea, every design, a silent declaration that I was done being the victim of someone else's ambition. And beneath that quiet determination, something else grew, the seed of revenge. Not the kind that screamed or broke things. The kind that smiled, waited, and plotted. I didn't need to destroy Evelyn yet. All I had to do was rise higher than she ever dreamed possible. And when that day came, she'd watch everything she stole turn to dust in her hands. Revenge isn't fireworks. It's a patient architecture of small, impossible-to-ignore cuts. I stopped wanting Evelyn to suffer in the heat of the moment. I wanted her unraveling to be inevitable, factual, irreversible. So I did what I should have done the day I first saw her take my work. I collected truth like a scientist collects data. Step 1 was evidence. I dug through every corner of my life at Skyline: old hard drives, archived emails, commit histories, prototype builds, chat logs. I found timestamps that matched the nights I'd stayed until dawn. I pulled up version control diffs proving the architecture decisions were mine. I restored old Slack threads where I'd mapped user flows in the exact language that later showed up in Athena's spec. I cataloged meetings, calendar invites with my name on them, presentations where I'd annotated slides in the margins. Some of it was messy, half-finished notes, scribbles on napkins, voice memos of late-night brainstorming. But together, it formed a trail, fingerprints I could lay across Evelyn's polished press releases. I wasn't alone. Jenna became my first ally. She was careful, terrified of being seen, but once I showed her the evidence, she refused to look away. "I always thought you deserved more," she whispered, eyes fierce. She started keeping notes of her own, the offhand comments, the times Evelyn rewrote histories in meetings, the way Nathan always seemed to be where my work was being showcased. Next, I turned to tech. IT wasn't always helpful. Their loyalty leaned with whoever paid their bonuses, but every system leaves a trace. Access logs, server move timestamps, repo commit metas. I spent nights learning how to read them, how to make patterns sing. There were gaps where files moved under Evelyn's account. There were edits timestamped before I'd even slept. Each anomaly was another brick in the wall I was building. But evidence alone wouldn't destroy her. People forgive facts if the story around them is plausible. So I engineered context. I began planting subtle social seeds, small, innocent conversations that nudged people to remember in ways that favored the truth. At a low-key industry meetup, I bumped into an old beta tester who'd used my early prototype. I casually mentioned a non-public feature and watched them light up. "You mean the flow only Maya's version had?" "That's what we used. Everyone was talking about it." Later, when Evelyn tried to claim the feature as a late-stage idea, a few testers raised eyebrows. The story's edges started to fray. I also let Evelyn think I was broken. I crafted small public appearances that played into the narrative she'd already pushed. A quiet resignation, a somber LinkedIn post about taking time to reflect, a few offhand remarks to mutual acquaintances suggesting I'd moved on. Her hubris grew. She signed more deals, invited more press. She boasted, unintentionally widening the gap between what she said in public and what my dossier showed in private. Then I set emotional traps. People like Evelyn build fortresses of image. They can't resist polishing them when offered applause. I started seeding compliments to investors, to product reviewers, to mutual contacts that mentioned specific details only the original designer would know. I'd slip a phrase into an email praise for the elegant micro-interaction in Athena's onboarding and watch as an investor repeated it in a meeting, crediting Evelyn for her team's brilliant onboarding. Each echo made her claim louder and, crucially, more public. Most importantly, I protected myself. I created encrypted backups of everything, duplicated my evidence to multiple trusted people and a lawyer friend who owed me a favor. I learned to be untraceable in my movements inside the company's narrative while being surgical in my outreach outside it. I didn't play to destroy Nathan. He was a tool in Evelyn's story, and often as much a pawn as a villain. I cultivated a quiet relationship with him, not with fake niceties, but with pointed questions. How did you approach the onboarding flow? I'd ask over coffee, listening for holes. He wanted approval more than power, and through him I learned where Evelyn exaggerated and where she truly lacked coverage. His nervousness in one meeting, the way he misremembered a source, gave me the kind of human inconsistency that facts alone sometimes lack. Weeks turned into months. I assembled a dossier that could not be dismissed, chronological commits, server logs, annotated slide comparisons, eyewitness notes, and a timeline showing when Evelyn first began reframing our shared work. I summarized everything in a clean, almost clinical PDF, not dramatic, just undeniable. Then I built the hook. I reached out quietly to an independent tech journalist I respected, not with fury, but with curiosity. I have a question about authorship and attribution in startups, I wrote, attaching a small redacted sample. He replied with professional interest and asked for a meeting. I didn't show him everything right away. Instead, I let him interview Jenna and a couple of beta testers. He found the inconsistencies himself. When he asked for the full dossier, I sent it under condition. He verified facts and promised to corroborate before publishing. Meanwhile, I made one last social nudge, a birthday party for a minor investor, where Evelyn was sure to be photographed and praised. I wouldn't confront her there. I'd just be present, smiling in the background. Let her bask in light while the journalist's questions formed in the dark. I wasn't trying to humiliate Evelyn in public. I was trying to restore what was mine. I wanted the world to see the truth and have to reconcile it. I wanted her proud statements to be weighed against timestamps and testimony. That night, as I arranged the dossier one final time, Jenna texted, "She's more arrogant than ever. This will hurt." I breathed in, steady and cool. "Good," I typed back. "Let her believe it. The fall will be cleaner that way. Because the most dangerous thing a betrayer can do is assume you're defeated." And Evelyn, proud, polished Evelyn, believed that with every fiber of her being. I closed my laptop, listening to the city hum below. The trap was set, the pieces in motion. Now everything depended on patience, precision, and the slow, satisfying work of proof. Tomorrow, the journalist calls. The hardest part of revenge is waiting for the world to notice the tremor you already feel. The journalist's piece dropped on a rainy Tuesday. He didn't write it as a screed. He wrote it like an investigator, timelines, screenshots, side-by-side comparisons, corroborated quotes. He started with a simple line, "How does a project with one woman's fingerprints become another's flagship?" Then he let the evidence do the rest. I watched the article open on my phone at 7:02 a.m., the exact minute it went live. The first wave was shock, then a cold clarity. Social feeds filled with highlighted timestamps, with comments like, "Wait, this was her, and why didn't anyone bet this?" Evelyn's polished PR phrases, once echoed across interviews, now sounded hollow under the weight of metadata. Within hours, the newsroom called. Investors demanded emergency calls. Skyline's Slack imploded with threads I hadn't seen since the Athena launch. Clarify authorship legal. Is this true? Evelyn's public persona frayed as private messages leaked, the ones showing how she instructed HR to diminish my role and how she'd encouraged Nathan to publicly assume credit. I could have screamed then and there. Instead, I put on a coat, stepped outside, and walked to a cafe 2 blocks from the office. I wanted distance, air that wasn't charged with the office's bright, synthetic light. I wanted a place where I could be anonymous among strangers while a company I'd built unraveled. The first phone call I received was from Jenna. Her voice was raw. "They're calling her. They're asking for explanations." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. "Good," I said. "Let them ask." Skyline's board convened an emergency meeting that afternoon. Cameras clustered outside the glass doors like vultures. Evelyn arrived with a composed face and a hurried statement prepared by legal, all words and no timestamps. She repeated the company line. It had been a team effort. Any attribution issues were administrative errors. But words without proof were now a liability. My dossier had become public record in the article's appendix. The board didn't have to choose between two stories, they could read the sequence of events for themselves. Investors don't love narratives, they love certainty. Certainty fled Skyline that day. One by one, key stakeholders demanded audits, pauses on funding rounds, and emergency oversight. An investor who had once toasted Evelyn's leadership called her office and asked, "Did you intentionally misattribute design authorship?" The silence on the other end was worse than a lie. Nathan called me that evening. His voice trembled, guilt, fear, the realization he'd been paraded as a genius when he'd been handed work already mapped. He asked if we could talk. I listened. I didn't need to forgive him, but his confession and stumbling answers made it cleaner for everyone else to see how the narrative had been manufactured. The public humiliation was surgical. Evelyn's quotes were replayed in headlines with bracketed inserts, claimed credit for features with timestamps to missing roots. The VC firm pulling its provisional term sheet did it quietly, a legal letter, a transferred fund. The people who'd sat politely in panels with her now asked pointed questions. The press releases that had once polished her name were amended with retractions and clarifications. Her image collapsed not with theater, but with a steady collapse of credibility. At the same time, I'd activated another layer, a quiet legal pressure. My lawyer, the friend who remembered my first prototype demo in a cramped conference room, filed formal documentation with the company and prepared an intellectual property claim. I didn't want a drawn-out public spectacle. I wanted the truth recognized where it mattered, in contracts, in shareholder calls, and in the ledger. Once the investigative journalist's piece had primed the public and investors, the legal mechanisms could do the rest. Then came the board meeting with the final cut. Evelyn was put on leave pending investigation. The board cited reputational risk and a breach of trust. She left the room without tears, only a thin smile that no longer convinced anyone. Nathan was suspended pending review of his involvement. Skyline's leadership sent an internal memo promising transparency and new authorship protocols. It was procedural, clinical, the kind of language companies use to look like they're fixing things. I watched Evelyn walk out of the building under an umbrella, cameras flashing, and for the first time since the Project Athena presentation, I felt no tremor in my chest. There was relief, yes, but not triumph. The hurt had been reshaped into a patient satisfaction. She had been unmasked not by spectacle but by evidence, and that was the most poetic justice of all. People asked me afterward if I'd enjoyed seeing her fall. I thought about the long nights, the stolen credits, the emails left unsigned, the hum of fluorescent lights that once felt like home. What I felt was quieter, validation, like salt on an old wound, and a deep, exhausted peace. I had not screamed or raged. I had built a case and let the truth do what lies could not. I didn't gloat on social media. I answered a few interviews with calm, factual replies and pointed back to the article and the documents. I let the record stand. My name began appearing in pieces that chronicled the aftermath, not as revenge porn, but as restitution. That night, I walked past Skyline one last time. The lobby lights blinked. The logo on the glass looked different, somehow diminished, human. I breathed in, steady and unhurried. The storm had been executed with cold precision, but what stayed with me was the quiet dignity of the act. I had not sought to break a person. I had sought to reclaim a part of myself. Evelyn had been toppled by the very tools she'd used to rewrite history, narrative, network, and polished rhetoric. I had reversed them with timestamps, witnesses, and relentless patience. As the city hummed and the rain softened to mist, I felt something else, not yet victory, but a closing of a chapter. The war had reached its crescendo. The final piece, what to do with what I'd built now that the floor was clear, was still to come. Some endings don't arrive with applause or fireworks. Sometimes they arrive with silence, the kind that feels like peace. Months passed after Skyline collapsed under the weight of its own lies. The company survived, but Evelyn didn't. Her name disappeared from every press article, every women in tech panel, every conference stage she once dominated. She'd become a ghost in an industry that once worshipped her. The board settled my claim quietly. I didn't want their money, I wanted acknowledgement. And when the legal notice arrived confirming my authorship rights to Project Athena and full ownership of the technology that later became Phoenix, I felt something deep inside me finally settle. Evelyn had built her empire on deception. I rebuilt mine on truth. Phoenix launched 6 months later. No investors. No shiny PR stunts. Just me, a small team of believers, and the product that had once been dismissed as too ambitious. Within weeks, reviews called it the software Skyline wished it could have built. Funny how karma doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through headlines, through quiet irony, through the sight of your rival watching from the sidelines as you rise higher than she ever imagined. Jenna came to visit one afternoon after the launch. She looked around my new office, minimalist, bright, full of laughter, and said, "You know, Evelyn's working as a consultant now. No one trusts her with leadership anymore." I smiled. "That's the thing about trust," I said softly. "Once you break it, you don't rebuild it. You just live in its ruins." We sat for a while, watching the sunlight move across the floor. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the ache of betrayal anymore. Only gratitude for the pain that taught me to value myself again. Because that's the real twist no one tells you about revenge. It doesn't heal you. It reveals you. It strips away illusions of loyalty, of fairness, of safety, until all that's left is who you really are beneath the wreckage. And when you stand up again, you're no longer the person who was hurt. You're someone new. Someone unbreakable. One night, as I closed my office, I got an email from Evelyn. Just one line, "You won." I hope it was worth it. I stared at it for a long time before replying. It wasn't about winning. It was about remembering who I was before you tried to erase me. Then I hit send and never thought about her again. The next morning, I took a walk through the city, past the old Skyline building, past the cafe where I'd waited for the world to turn. It was strange how everything looked smaller now. The same streets that once felt suffocating now felt wide open, full of possibility. People stared at me differently now, not as the woman who was betrayed, but as the one who fought back with intelligence, patience, and grace. I didn't need to tell my story anymore. It spoke for itself. At a tech conference months later, I stood on stage to give a keynote titled "Reclaiming What's Yours." My voice didn't shake. I told the audience about ideas, how fragile they are, how easily they can be stolen, and how fiercely they must be protected. I didn't name Evelyn. I didn't have to. Everyone already knew. When I finished, the room stood in applause not for the revenge, but for the resilience. And in that moment, I realized something. Justice isn't always about making others fall. Sometimes, it's about standing so tall that their shadows can't touch you anymore. That night, as I walked off stage, I felt lighter than I'd felt in years. The story that had begun with betrayal ended with clarity. I had lost everything once, but in the process, I'd gained something priceless, myself. I paused by the window, looking out at the city lights reflecting off glass towers. The skyline glowed, a mosaic of stories, victories, and scars. And somewhere down there, in a quiet apartment, maybe Evelyn was watching too. Maybe she finally understood what it felt like to lose something she couldn't rebuild, reputation built on theft, undone by truth. I smiled and whispered to my reflection, the same words I'd once said to the empty office the night she betrayed me. They don't know who they just betrayed. Only this time, it wasn't a threat. It was a reminder to her, to me, to anyone listening, that betrayal might wound you, but it can never define you unless you let it. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, someone who took what was yours and called it their own? Tell me your story in the comments. Did you rise above it? Did you fight back? Or are you still finding your way through the pain? Because if you're watching this and you feel broken, remember, I was too. And look at me now. Sometimes, revenge isn't about destruction. It's about rebirth. Subscribe for more powerful stories like this one, where betrayal burns, but justice always rises from the ashes.